In New Jersey, thousands of people enjoy the fall of the cards and the rattle of the dice every day. But for some of them, gambling is tragic. Recently, a Monmouth County man killed himself because of gambling debts. And a Burlington man gambled away nearly $19,000 of his employer's money he'll have to pay back after he gets out of jail. Last April, Phelps Hawkins took a closer look at the addiction called compulsive gambling. We repeat Phelps's report tonight.
My name is Harry R. I'm a compulsive gambler. There were 3 or 4 of us standing by a window of the bowling alley, and it was raining, and we were betting on raindrops, which raindrop would hit the bottom of the pane first. Did you win? No.
A wife has to do everything she can so that her husband doesn't get a hold of money.
When people think of gambling historically, they probably think of Las Vegas or Reno. But that's changing now, especially on the East Coast. Now the name Atlantic City would almost certainly pop up. But it would be a mistake to get into the gambling is gambling syndrome, because there are some very important differences between Nevada gambling and New Jersey gambling. In Nevada, gambling is the major industry, accounting for some 60% of the state's total revenue. Not so here in New Jersey, already the nation's most industrialized state. Yet New Jersey gambling has a far greater potential impact because Atlantic City is so much more easily accessible than Las Vegas or Reno. Within only 200 miles of these casinos are more than 50 million people, 50 million potential gamblers.
And they're flocking to the once famous boardwalk. Bally's Park Place Casino reports that 25,000 people have been walking through its doors on any given weekend day, and they expect the number to jump above 50,000 people each day this summer. And profits? In just its first year of operation, Resorts International became the most profitable casino in the world, with winnings of $232 million. Beyond that, total profits for the 3 casinos since 1978 is more than 3 times the money take at the state's 4 racetracks, and 2 of the casinos opened fairly recently. But that's not to say the solidly entrenched horse racing industry is suffering too much. Its 1979 total share was up almost 10% from 1978. At the same time, track attendance was down by 10%, probably reflecting the gas crisis and perhaps the lure of the casinos. Obviously, fewer railbirds are losing more money. And then there's the lottery, the state's own numbers operation. No sad tale here. Total sales of lottery tickets in 1979 were up 25% over 1978. And now, of course, we have state bingo. No, the sad tale begins with another statistic. A 1975 nationwide study estimated there are 1.1 million compulsive gamblers, and perhaps 3 times that number of potential compulsive gamblers. Largely from that study, the State Health Department estimates there are 60,000 compulsive gamblers in New Jersey.
I think you're showing a vast increase only because now it's coming out of the closet like alcoholism did 20 years ago. But to say that compulsive gambling is more today than it was years ago, I don't think that's the case. I think it's just coming to the light and the forefront more now than ever before.
Arnie Wexler is Vice President of the National Council on Compulsive Gambling. For Wexler, casinos in Atlantic City is a positive step toward forcing public concern about gambling problems. But it's no positive step for the compulsive gambler.
The problem with the casinos as opposed to other types of gambling is if you go to the racetrack, you have 15 minutes to make a decision before each decision. Where at the casino in 15 minutes you can make hundreds of decisions, maybe even thousands.
The worst I ever lost was $46,000 in one night. I was making $95 a week at the time.
Well, how did you lose $46,000?
I went to Las Vegas. I owed out $10,000 and I borrowed $10,000 more. And I went to Las Vegas. And the first night I was there, I won $36,000. And next night I lost $46,000.
Gamblers Anonymous, just about the only place a compulsive gambler can turn. This is a weekly meeting of one of 25 chapters in New Jersey. The Garden State can boast 10% of the national membership in Gamblers Anonymous. And all of the people here know all too well the sad truth of the compulsive gambler. The next best thing to gambling and winning is gambling and losing.
The idea that somehow, someday, he would control his gambling is the great obsession of every compulsive gambler.
I didn't care about my kids, I didn't care about the bills, I didn't care about anything. All I wanted to do, I wanted to be in action, that's all.
My son never existed to me because I was always running. I came into the program on Mother's Day, 1968, May 12th, in Brooklyn.
I stole all my father's gold coins. I stole every bit of jewelry my mother owned, and I hocked it and never got it back. And this was a continuous thing. This is the way I lived my life. Anything I could do to get a buck to gamble, I would do.
The stories, after a while, take on a sameness. Same tune, different musician. Down the basement hall from the GA meeting, a meeting of Gammanon, the wives of compulsive gamblers. Both groups know the three basic stages. First, the winning stage, as the gambler learns and profits and enjoys, building up to betting levels equaling and exceeding his annual salary.
I always won bowling, but by the time I was 16, I was betting on everything else. And I used to walk around at 13, 14, 15, 16 years old with thousands of dollars in my pockets. I'd go into a shoe shine guy and have him shine my shoes and give him a tip, $10 tip.
Then to stage two, the losing stage, characterized by chasing, betting more and more to recoup losses. There's the search for money. Bonds and insurance policies are cashed in, and the family is affected.
My oldest child knows all about me. I mean, she knows my whole story. When we go past Freehold Raceway, when we drive past Freehold Raceway, she'll say to me, Daddy, that's where all the people go to lose their money.
I wanted their father to be that wonderful guy that the kids looked up to and loved, and they did look up to him and love him because I lied to them for so many years.
Borrowing is easy at first, like a gambling win. Money available with little effort, until it can't be repaid. Then, the need to cover up.
The one thing that every one of us had in common besides the money was that we were all compulsive liars because we had to lie to everybody around us to get out, and we all took time away from our families. In other words, you can be a compulsive gambler and not lose a lot of money, but have a child who's a junkie, have a child who's a prostitute, because there's no control, there's no guidance, there's no family unity.
The first time the compulsive gambler is bailed out, usually by family or a close friend, is the start of stage 3, the desperation stage.
I wasn't assertive enough in the areas I should have been, and because of that, he went back to gambling almost immediately.
3 years I was into the finance company, and 4 years in the Shylock, and 5 years I was stealing from my father.
At this point, studies show 4 options: suicide, imprisonment, running, or seeking help. 1/5 will attempt suicide. Almost half face jail. About 98% will experience marital separation or divorce. For those who seek help, there is hope.
Can you honestly tell me right now that you will not go back into gambling?
I'll never make a bet again as long as I live. I know it for a fact. I said it the first night I came into GA. And everybody told me, don't say that. You can't say that. And I said it 10 years and 8 months ago. And I'll say it for the rest of my life. I'll never gamble again as long as I live. Because I'll never go back to being the animal that I was. I like myself now. I get up in the morning and I look in the mirror. And I see myself and I like what I see.
The opportunities to gamble in New Jersey are increasing, as is the number of participants. And the state has its hands in most of it, not only regulating gambling, but also promoting it. But is it doing enough? We'll tackle that important question in tomorrow's report. And we'll visit the only state-supported treatment center for compulsive gamblers in the country. It is not located in New Jersey, but half of its residential patients come from our state. I'm Phelps Hawkins.
The problem of compulsive gambling, a recently defined form of addiction, is just now coming out of the closet. That's what we reported last night in our rebroadcast of the first of 2 parts on the subject. Tonight, reporter Phelps Hawkins concludes our closer look on compulsive gambling with a report on the state's response to the problem.
As to why other states such as New Jersey and New York, whose populations far exceed Maryland, whose problem far exceeds that of Maryland, I really do not know why they haven't gotten off their butts and gotten to developing a program.
That's Dr. Robert Politzer, director of the Maryland Compulsive Gambling Counseling Center outside Baltimore. Maryland contributes $100,000 to the center, making it the only such state-funded operation in the country. When the center opened last November, there was a waiting list of 100 compulsive gamblers seeking treatment. Dr. Politzer has no doubt that the problem is widespread.
Since the center has been established, we've been able to get a greater handle on the magnitude of the problem, because in just 6 weeks we were filled to capacity. But I think it's a question of public education and public awareness.
Bringing about that awareness is the single-minded purpose of Walt Devlin, a frequent visitor at the center. Former pro basketball player and native of Atlantic City, Devlin is a recently recovered compulsive gambler.
With the continued building program, where eventually you're going to end up with 15 or 20 casinos, that opportunity to participate in that activity is going to be increased 10, 20 times fold. And with the increased opportunity, you are going to have an increased social problem with addictive gamblers.
Of course, gambling here in Atlantic City is just the latest addition to New Jersey's gambling scene. And it is this pervasive presence of gambling, the casinos, the lottery, state bingo, the racetracks, and maybe down the road, High-Lie, that begs the question, is the state, and that includes the government, the voters, and the casino industry, are they willing to accept responsibility for the widespread gambling they have now promoted in this state? And what are they doing about the victims of our newest form of addiction, the compulsive gamblers? Well, not much.
We do have a gaming environment here in the state of New Jersey, and I happen to think it's well regulated. But the fact remains that if there is a problem with compulsive gambling, if you're going to address it, then you'd have to address it statewide. I think my problem is that no one has really identified it as a problem in Atlantic City.
Mr. Lordeye's other problem is that he's not sure compulsive gambling can even be defined. Another person who disputes the existence of a compulsive gambling problem is Billy Weinberger, the president of Bally's Park Place Casino. Do you think that compulsive gambling is a real problem right now?
I certainly do not. The people that they are really talking about, and regardless of where you come from or whether you have legal or illegal gambling, if they want to gamble, there is a way and a place to gamble.
Weinberger was the only casino official to allow our cameras inside his operation or to grant an interview. To him, his casino is just entertainment, offering fancy restaurants, an opulent hotel, and big-name stars like Mel Torme, as well as the games.
Same way, breaking up is hard to really soft. They say that breaking
But being able to croon a tune, whether it's Mel Torme, Billy Weinberger, or Joseph Lordeye, isn't going to lull the problem into non-existence, because the simple fact is, gambling is making some people very sick. That's clear from the experience of both Gamblers Anonymous and doctors at facilities like the Carrier Clinic, a private psychiatric hospital known for its work with addiction and located right here in New Jersey. The clinic's medical director, Dr. George Wilson, has watched compulsive gamblers at their worst as they go through withdrawal, severe headaches, abdominal pains, diarrhea, cold sweats, weight loss, and severe depression. Is there a bigger compulsive gambling problem out there than most people seem to realize?
Oh, I think we're all convinced that there is, yes. In diagnosing categories of mental illness, compulsive gambling has been included as a specific type of addictive or habit disorder. The psychiatric profession has recognized that this is a clinical entity that's quite distinct from other forms of chemical addiction or other forms of habit disorder.
Dr. Wilson believes, as do other experts on addiction, that the compulsive gambling problem is increasing, specifically due to the huge growth in legalized gambling. In 1960, legal gambling was about a $5 billion industry, but by 1975, it was almost $20 billion. And that was 3 years before Atlantic City casino gambling really got going. So just who are these people? The people who suffer from what some call the invisible disease.
They tend to be people of higher than average intelligence, a very high energy level, They tend to be very outgoing, extroverted people with a great deal of physical energy. They tend to have a high tolerance to stress. They tend also, and this is very important from the treating psychiatrist point of view, to be very volatile in their mood. They are very easily subject to depression as well as to feelings of euphoria and excitement.
State Assemblyman Chuck Hardwick has introduced a bill calling for a statewide assessment of just how much that euphoria and excitement ends up destroying lives. And U.S. Senator Harrison Williams has a similar bill, but of national scope, fighting its way through a preoccupied Congress. Hardwick is especially concerned about those who are not yet old enough to bet legally, but are being primed for when they are.
This is a comic book on horse racing and why it's a good thing. And the most surprising part is towards the end, how to read a scratch sheet that's handed out at the racetracks. Now, when you're putting out comic books, you're obviously aiming at a juvenile market. Our children are being exposed to it. To what extent they're getting the idea that gambling can solve all their problems in life, and to what extent if this would lead to compulsive gambling, I don't really know.
The real problem with compulsive gambling is not so much its numbers as its scope. By the time a person is in the desperation stage and likely to seek help, he or she is probably in big legal trouble, is emotionally and perhaps physically debilitated, their family in a shambles. And experts estimate that 30 other people suffer, to one degree or another, when the compulsive gambler finally crumbles from the pressure. Mainly friends and relatives who have unsuccessfully tried to bail out the victim and have themselves become victims. Of course, while New Jersey is doing next to nothing about the problem, no other state besides Maryland is doing much either, even Nevada. But former compulsive gambler Walt Devlin thinks New Jersey's problems may have just begun.
I think what will happen is that New Jersey will reap, the financial profits, but the problems are going to go home. The problems will go to Philadelphia, and they'll go to Newark, and they'll go to New York, and they'll go to Baltimore, and they'll go to Pittsburgh. I think you're going to see a kind of spreading epidemic in that context.
Finally, the issue of basic social responsibility. Commissioner Lordi's suggestion that any action should await proof of a problem, proof that already amply exists, or that documentation should be provided by some outside group, could best be termed ostrich-like. A leading psychiatrist and federal expert on compulsive gambling has said, "It seems as a society we admire a risk-taker who wins, but we reject a risk-taker who loses." By any gauge, a compulsive gambler is both a risk-taker and a loser. I'm Phelps Hawkins.